So this is a fragrance that really surprised me recently. I was looking at the note breakdown and I saw tobacco, vanilla, oak moss, incense, and I said this is going to be a really interesting fragrance. And then I sampled it when I had acquired the Discovery set, and it surprised me for a completely different reason. I'm excited to give you my thoughts on this fragrance from 2017 by Une Nuit Nomade. This one is called Memory Motel, so make sure to stay tuned. Now before I begin today's video and I give you my thoughts on Memory Motel by Une Nuit Nomade, which is basically a tobacco, vanilla, carnation, incense, and iris fragrance, I want to start things off by saying that if you're a fan of fragrance related content, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. I'm really trying to make it to 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year. With your assistance, I believe we can do it, but 65% of the people who watch my channel are not subscribed to it, so please, if you could hit that red subscribe button, would really mean a lot to me. Hit the bell and give it a thumbs up. This fragrance was composed by one of my favorite perfumers. I know I say that all the time. I have a lot of favorite perfumers, but this truly is one of my favorites. As a matter of fact, when I initially realized that I was a huge fan of her work, I actually set out to acquire as many of her fragrances as possible. And the perfumer is Annick Bernardo. And I went out and I bought Boss Bottled by Hugo Boss. She's responsible for that. Cocorico by Jean Paul Gaultier. She's also worked on Armani Attitude by Giorgio Armani. And the list goes on and on. She's done designer and niche fragrances, so on and so forth. Now this fragrance is certainly on the darker side of things, so I knew intuitively and instinctively that this is a fragrance I would wear / review as the weather started getting a little bit colder out, and lo and behold, it is quite chilly outside. But this fragrance I actually fell in love with for a completely different reason. It actually reminds me of another fragrance that Annick Bernardo had composed a while before she released this one, and it is a fragrance that I truly fell in love with. And this is actually a more wearable version of the fragrance to which I'm alluding. In any case, I'm going to give you my thoughts regarding the smell. Let's take a quick look at the presentation. So like I had mentioned before with the notes tobacco, vanilla, incense, carnation, iris, bergamot, oak moss, this seems to be a very dark, rich, bold type of a fragrance, definitely one that is suited towards the colder weather. And when I was smelling it initially, I picked up on a little bit of like a smoky characteristic, and instinctively I just thought, oh, it's the incense because there's incense in the note breakdown, until I spent a little bit more time with it and I said, that's not incense, that's birch. And when I started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, I thought birch, I thought vanilla, I thought all of these other ingredients. Guys, this fragrance is a more wearable version of Patchouli 24 by Labo. That is another fragrance composed by Annick Bernardo, and that was the second fragrance I ever purchased from Labo. I believe I purchased it back in 2012. My first from the brand was Oud 27, but I initially fell in love with Patchouli 24 when I sampled it on skin. The issue with that fragrance is that it opens up very aggressive, very bold, definitely on the darker side of things, and many people would argue that it's one of the more challenging fragrances to wear by Labo, and the birch tar has a lot to do with it. Now the dry down with the labdanum, the benzoin, the resins is just so warm and sweet and decadent, and that's what this fragrance gives you from the very beginning. So there is birch in here, sure, but it's nowhere near as loud as it is in Patchouli 24. So as soon as I smelled it, and I promise you, it did not take a long time to make that connection. If you've tried the two of them, you'll make that connection right away. I fell in love with it immediately. I said, oh my goodness, this is a more wearable Patchouli 24, one that I can wear right away. So how would I describe the smell? It does open up with a bit of smoke. There's incense in the note breakdown. Yeah, okay, there might be olibanum in here or something like that, but no, you're gonna smell birch right away. And there's a little bit of birch, not overly done, just enough to sort of give you this, oh, there's a touch of smoke in here sensation. And then immediately you pick up on the warmth. Now, in terms of tobacco, it's not a tobacco similar to any one other tobacco that I've tried. Like, I can't compare it to Tobacco Vanille. I can't compare it to Creationy by Roger Parfum. Like, I can't compare it to a lot of other tobacco fragrances or Tabac Color by Christian Dior. This is kind of its own thing. it is its own entity, if I may. And you do get that vanilla warmth with these ambery nuances and a little bit of earthiness. In terms of the carnation, you know, I am familiar with carnation as it's used in a number of other fragrances, especially some old school classics, Equipage by Hermes being one of them, if I'm remembering correctly. And perhaps I do get a little bit of the carnation from this, but I suppose it's overshadowed by some of the darker ingredients, namely the oak moss, the vanilla, the tobacco. This is an amazing fragrance. If you found Patchouli 24 to be a little bit too much on the smoky and aggressive side of things, you want something that kind of fast forwards itself to those sweet resinous ingredients in the base while still employing a touch of smoke, definitely check out Memory Motel by Une Nuit Nomade. At this point, it is one of my favorites. I love Sun Bleached. Such an easy, smooth, clean, compliment getter type of a fragrance. And I also really enjoy Click Song. That is a beautifully done amber floral. This fragrance immediately shot itself to the top of the list, and there are a couple other fragrances from the brand that I'm eyeing at the moment. We'll see if I end up picking up any in the future, but I love this one. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. So first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, admittedly, it's not the most unique fragrance given the fact that I was able to compare it to Patchouli 24, and I would say it's about 70% similar, but this one does eventually go in its own direction, and it's composed by the same great perfumer who has such a rich history of composing a wide variety of different fragrances, both designer and niche. The overall smell is super pleasant, a lot more wearable, 10 times more wearable than Patchouli 24. Try it for yourself if you can. Longevity on this is 8+ hours. Projection was great for the first 45 minutes of application, radiated within an arm's length. There is a touch of bergamot in the opening. It's not very pronounced, and it really only lasts for 10 to 15 minutes after you apply the fragrance. In terms of the versatility, perfectly unisex, I would say. I think this one is great for formal occasions. I think this is great for somebody who's a little bit older, and this is more of like a suit and tie or really nice dress kind of a fragrance, especially given the price point. When you're buying a really luxury niche perfume, you don't want to wear it casually. Some of us do, I know I personally do, but for the average consumer out there that doesn't have a ton of disposable income, with whom I sympathize by the way, I can see this one being a formal occasion, kind of a fragrance, perfect for the colder weather. Fall and winter is really where it's at. And then in terms of the presentation, I do enjoy the presentation. I like the graphic that's on the box here, the little pedestal on which the fragrance sits. My final verdict on this fragrance is it is a really pleasant ambery tobacco vanilla fragrance with a touch of carnation, oak moss, and smoke coming from birch, not incense. It's a great alternative and a more wearable alternative to Patchouli 24 by Labo, one of Annick Menardo's best. I am super stoked to have this in my collection. It's going to be a high rotation fragrance for me. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this review of Memory Motel by Une Nuit Nomade. If you own or have tried anything from the brand, you want to share your thoughts with me, please feel free. Leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, give it a thumbs up. Love you guys. See you tomorrow. Bye.